Good morning.
Hey, good morning to you.
Today is September 29th, 2021. We're in Ventura, California, and we're interviewing Leon Ruosso. Leon was in the Army and attained the rank of Sargeant. He's going to tell us about his life and his military experience. Leon, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us where you were born and when and all those things?
My name is Leon Ruosso. I was born June 23rd, 1948. Dora and Ralph Ruosso, my dad being a 6-year veteran of World War II. He flew in the B-19s under the belly of the guns. And I had a brother who passed away, but he had a brother. Anyway, so I was born in Panorama City. Actually, I was born in Los Angeles, and then 6 months later we moved to Panorama City, which was in the San Fernando Valley, which was just growing then. And it was an amazing experience. Everybody was coming home from the war, and on our block alone we had 52 children. So I have friends going back all the way to there, and just amazing. So one thing I remember early in life, I will tell you this out front, because this is going to be a very open, honest discussion or interview. I just like putting my cards on the table. I didn't know it, but I suffered from ADHD. I have all the way through my life. It caused me a lot of trouble up until 40, when I was diagnosed, and then it caused me more trouble with my wife. But we've resolved everything. Life's good. One thing I remember about that is I was always getting in trouble. So in kindergarten, believe it or not, I was already identified as a troublemaker. I was in kindergarten with my next door neighbor, Michael Miller, who's remained to be a friend. And I got into so much trouble in kindergarten, knocking down block houses and stuff, whatever I did. His mother spoke with the principal, and it went all the way through high school, grammar school, junior high school, high school. I was not allowed to have a class with Michael Miller, so I never did. I got poor grades, had a very hard time controlling my things. I had bullies rejecting me, I had girls rejecting me, I had poor grades because I just couldn't focus. But fortunately, in the 3rd grade, I started playing the clarinet. And the clarinet opened up doors for me because I was actually quite good. And I became quite good as the years went on. So I ultimately ended up in high school sitting first chair clarinet. I played alto sax in the jazz band. Music was my thing. I was going to become a rock star. Not a symphony conductor, but a rock star. But I knew all the chords and all that stuff. So that was my goal in life. And but while I was going through high school, once I graduated, I mixed up with some wrong people. Started getting into drugs, marijuana, that kind of stuff. And just faded. I couldn't stay in college. I'm probably the only one in America who got drafted from college. I just couldn't keep the grades up. So I got drafted in April of 1968. It was before the lottery. And I knew I was going in. I wasn't a big protester of the war, but during that period of time, all of my intellectual friends who were in college, all lawyers, doctors, Indian chiefs now, pardon the Indian chief thing, were avoiding it. In fact, my very best friend, today, still my very best friend, ended up becoming a conscientious objector. So we have on one side a veteran, and the other side a CO. My mother ultimately wrote a letter on his behalf, and I'm sure other people did too, but he became a CO. So I'm the only one out of our clan that went in the service. I got drafted. That was the time when they were starting to draft Marines. It was the 2nd month they were drafting Marines. There was 45 or 50,000 Army draftees, and then there was going to be about 12,000 during my month of April. I walk into the induction center on Broadway. You guys remember, I think it was 1520 South Broadway. Something that you just never forget. Went into this giant room, like an auditorium. There were hundreds of soon-to-be soldiers in the room, sitting in little chairs with the little desks on top. And there was a pile this high of files and a pile this high of files. And I knew that small pile was Marines. So I knew I couldn't handle the Marines. I'm a very patriotic guy. I love our country. I'm kind of ashamed of where it's heading these days, but I love my country. I love the freedom it provides. Just an amazing place with all of its faults. But I'm not a war hero type. So in my mind, I was thinking, I'll do the Army. I'll pull it off. But if they draft me in the Marines, I'm dead. I'm going for that door. And I had an eye on the door way across the auditorium. I was going to just cadoodle what they called me in the Army. Got on a bus later that day and went to Fort Ord. Got into Fort Ord. We started basic training. It was really a wonderful experience because I'm very socially oriented, and to have 250 in the platoon, but 40 in whatever they call it, or maybe it's a company platoon, a squad, I'm not sure, but anyway, they have like 40 guys in our little dorm, whatever you want, barracks, that you're with 24/7. You become really good friends, and you have so much in common. You have a common, quote, enemy, the Army, the military, because you do have to follow orders, and I'm not much of an order taker, never respected authority very much, so it was challenging. But I got through basic training. I was the last guy in basic training to shave my mustache. Got a big round of applause, and that party began. So we went through basic training, wonderful experiences. Running 25 miles. I mean, I wasn't in the greatest shape, but I'll tell you, when I got out of basic training, a few weeks into AIT, I was the best shape of my life, 165. And so I spent basic training at Fort Ord. I did my advanced infantry training in field wire communications, which was still at Fort Ord. Learned how to, splice wires to track down a wire break. Had to climb telephone poles. That was a lot of fun. Whoa, you had to climb telephone poles, and every day you climb a little higher, a little higher, a little higher. The day before the test, this was a week, they get you up there and you have to start throwing balls, softballs back and forth. The 40 guys on telephone poles rocking back and forth. Scared the shit out of me. Anyway, that may come in handy later in the story. So anyway, so after AIT, I got a 30-day leave. My dad took me to Hawaii for a week, and we had a good time. It was interesting. First time I ever ate escargot, and I swear I thought my dad was going to pick up a chick, but he was picking her up for me, but I never got anywhere with him. I come back from the 30 days, and I ship off to Oakland in some terminal. Just sleeping in a bunk, and the next morning, boom, we wake up, we got our duffel bags full, we get on to World Airlines. There was actually an airline called World Airlines. They were pretty much the sole source of transportation for the Army, I think. Anyway, it was a big plane. I think it was 17 hours or 20 hours. We had one stop, I believe, in Alaska. And then we landed in Da Nang. And as we're rolling in, it's almost ready to stop. You see all these bunkers everywhere in Vietnam, as most of you, at least the veterans know. It was just jungle and sandbags. And sandbags were everywhere because they had to build bunkers around everything. It was a pretty weird war with the way it was. You didn't know your enemy or any of that stuff, but there was these giant bunkers that I guess were storage bunkers or whatever, and they were lined by these 40, 50-gallon jugs of empty formaldehyde cans. I think they were filled with water, and there were literally hundreds of them. Everywhere you looked, there were those things to protect against mortar attacks. And obviously, the thought to me was, that's a lot of dead people that they have to use this formaldehyde for. It was kind of a wake-up call. We get off the plane, we were there for a couple of days, the next thing you know, we head out to Dong Ha. That's where I was, Dong Ha, which was just south of DMZ, about 5 miles. I was in an artillery battery, which we'll fill in later, and we supported the Marines outside. My job, even though I did the field wire work and the telephone climbing and the splicing and all that, most of what I did there was on the switchboard. We would take shifts, just working the switchboard, man, in the big communications bunker. I remember one night I was in on call from 12 to, I think it was 12 to 8 in the morning. And we would get incoming rounds, periodically, but it's generally quiet at night. So things really quieted down. And I was so bored, I could barely stay awake. And there's this little tiny, if you ever have tried this, these little tiny bugs that was walking around on a piece of paper. And so all of a sudden I put a pencil circle around it. It couldn't get across the ledge, like a fence. So I started playing with it for hours, directing it where to go. Anyway, I did experience some incoming, what they call incoming rounds, a lot of that going on. I did not, thank God, ever get close to being hit. I saw some of the damage. I never had to shoot anybody, but it was quite an experience. There was a situation, this is quite interesting, I think. There was a situation, there was a lot of, we were in the middle of the Black Power thing, and there was a lot of racism going on, but most of the people I met there that I really connected with happened to be black, but there were a lot of rednecks there also, and that combination didn't go well. And there was some serious situations that occurred. I won't go into detail, but the commander, because of what happened, took everybody's ammunition. So we had M16s and no ammunition. So somebody called their friend back in Congress, and then 2 days later we got our stuff back. I ended up getting a pineal cyst. I was driving trucks sometimes out of the base, and early on, as a newbie, I took this 3/4 truck, took it off base. Somebody asked me to do this, to get it washed, believe it or not. Why would they wash trucks? But that's what they were doing. I go off base about 3 or 4 miles, and there's this watering hole, which they say that's where you're supposed to go, 3 or 4 miles out, just turn left at the watering hole. I pull into the watering hole, and I get just overrun with little Vietnamese children. 10, 8, 12, maybe 6. There must have been 24 of them, all over me. And one's going into the glove box of the truck. Somebody else grabbed my roll. I just bought this nice new watch with buffalo wristband, pulled that off. If it wasn't for some Marines that were nearby, who chased them away like crazy, caught one and actually got my watch back, it was no good anymore, in the water. But it was frightening. It was frightening. And that also kind of presented interesting concepts for an American kid, 19 years old, about the other side of the world, how people live. It was quite a lesson for that, which has played well for me my whole life. So anyway.
So did you spend other times on the economy, as they say? Did you go into the town or into other places?
No, I never went into town. No. We were pretty up. I don't know if there were really a lot of town, but never went to towns. Never got off the base except to wash that truck. When I was coming back, this is another story. So, I don't know, a month later, somebody needs a ride. One of the captains or somebody in the base needed a ride to the airport down in Quan Tri, I believe. So I got the duty, and I drove him down there in this 3/4 truck again, dropped him off, turned around to come back. The U-joint breaks. The truck is no longer moving. And it's a pretty, I don't know if that was Ho Chi Minh Trail, but it was the main road that would take you all the way through the country, and it was probably that. And a lot of traffic on and off. You could see, you know, shelling and fires everywhere, but it was a well-traveled road during the day. Well, the truck was stopped. I'm there. I had nobody with me, and I have my rifle, and one of the guys stops and you need help. Yeah, the U-joint broke. I need to get towed or lifted back. So he calls the base. They tell me somebody will be out there soon. So I'm sitting in this truck watching the world go by and thinking what's going to happen if they don't get here, because it was starting to get dark, so I was getting nervous. Anyway, I looked to the right of me and there was this young boy. He must have been, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years old. And we just stared at each other, and it was almost like a bonding. So all of a sudden, out of the blue, he holds up a marijuana joint. 10, 12-year-old kid. Well, I'm a young kid in the middle of the war, so I said, okay, come. So he comes in the truck. He's sitting in the truck. It's open, truck. And he handed it to me. I take a couple of puffs and hand it over to him. He goes, no, Americans are crazy. They didn't do that. But all the Americans were crazy because they smoked this stuff. Anyway, fortunately, somebody came to pick me up. They towed the truck and got back. But months later, I served only about 4.5 months in Vietnam, because from that truck driving and stuff, they used to call it Jeep disease in World War II, from bouncing around so much because the roads were terrible there in Vietnam. I got a pineal abscess, which basically ended up one day with me not knowing. It's around Thanksgiving time, and we're just sitting listening to some music and a break, and our little hooch, you know, and I go to get up, I can't get up. I can't move, I can't walk. So they take me to the medic, and apparently he realizes what I got. I didn't know what it was. But they immediately the next day sent me down to Da Nang, where I had surgery to have it removed. And it was frightening because they had to give me a spinal tap, and they said, there's a very, very slight chance you could end up paralyzed, but you will go numb for quite a few hours because of this. I get the surgery, I wake up, and I'm thinking, oh God, I can't feel myself. So after a couple hours, I really got scared, but I began to get better. So they shipped me to Japan for another week of recuperation, I guess. Like that I didn't understand. But anyway, go there, I start to recuperate. They still don't know what, you know, they're not telling me my diagnosis, what the prognosis is, all this other stuff. They just kind of run me through as they would, like doing their triage thing. But while I was in Japan, a week later, the captain and one of the doctors there, I guess he was an anti-war guy, sent me home. He didn't send me back, which I thought is what I was going to do. He sent me home. So I ended up spending, I did not know this at the time, but the Army does the surgery correct. They cut out this huge cyst, and you got this big hole in the tailbone. Normally they stitch it up nowadays, but they decided that they wanted it to grow back up in and be brand new. That took 3 or 4 months. So I was in the hospital for 3 months. Letterman Hospital, great hospital, really, it was a good time. I mean, it was a good time. Letterman Hospital, which is now gone, it was torn down, I don't know, 20 years ago maybe. So I do want to share, I just had a couple of, before I talk about the hospital stay and the balance of my service, a couple of stories from Vietnam, maybe if there are some young people that, you know, maybe this is 100 years later, who knows. Couple of things. One thing that I found very interesting and kind of disgusting was one of the duties you have when you're on a base is you have to dispose of all the bodily functions, the more, let's call it number twos. And you would do these, they would just put out like a plywood box and a plywood floor with 3 holes in it, probably 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch plywood. There'd be 3 on this side, 3 on this side. So you'd be sitting across from somebody doing your business. It was pretty weird, worse than an outhouse. Anyway, that's not the bad part. Every 6 weeks, you got duty pardon the pun, to burn that shit. So you would go around all day with another guy and pick up these cans of poop, dozens of them, and you put them into this giant, well, it wasn't too giant, but you would put it into these containers, like steel, like barbecue pits or fire pits. And there were a few of them on the base, and you put all that stuff in there, you'd layer with kerosene and light it up. And you'd see these giant black plumes of smoke going up. I always thought as a kid, watching war movies, that those black plumes were bomb attacks, you know, explosions. But now you'll know, if you're a young person and it's 100 years later, that that was not bombs, that was poop burning up. One time I'm in my bunk, and everybody had to sleep within mosquito nets over you, and because it was terrible mosquito problem. You each had a green can of bug spray to kill the mosquitoes if you saw them, or whatever else there were. And one day I'm laying in bed, it's early evening, and I see this bug, a black bug flying down, and it's just hovering over my neck, and I look at it, and I kind of sit up on my hind, and it's a bug with a big black, it had to be like an inch diameter, and then a head and two fangs, and these wings buzzing, and scared the living holy crap out of me. So I snuck out of my net because I didn't want him to attack me, got my green can and chased him out to hooch until he was gone. That's the only real face-to-face combat I saw, and I won. So let's see if there's any others. Yeah, that's good enough. So let's get back to the hospital. So I get stationed at Letterman Hospital. I get into what they call an isolation ward because my injury, because it was not stitched up, I had exposed body or internal parts, and so they put me on an isolation ward. 12 of us at Letterman Hospital in our beds, and it's just a ward. But there were some of the most severest injured soldiers who had made it back. There was one guy who actually became my next door neighbor. He was there for almost a month. He had a lung shutout. He was an Army Ranger, and he had his machine, you know, with the tubes, helping him breathe. There was another guy on my other side, just terrible. His entire mouth was blown out. Is it not good to get descriptive like this?
Well, that's fine. This is the facts, Phil.
Okay.
This is the facts.
Okay. So there was another guy next to me with his entire mouth blown out. Just, he had no mouth. You can't even visualize what it means, but he was going to have some serious challenges in life. And as you went down, it was just one thing after another. And there was two guys at the end where one guy was 100% burned. I've never seen anything like that in my life. I don't think anybody, very few people ever have. But he was 100% burned. I don't know if it was napalm or what it was, but he was still alive. And obviously he was done in Vietnam, so he was staying alive for a while they shipped him back here. He eventually died. But we would, because I was mobile, I could walk. After maybe 3-4 weeks, I could begin to walk. And the guys that could walk, we'd help the nurses turn him periodically. So he was unconscious. I couldn't even communicate with him or see his eyes, but that was shocking. And then there was another guy at the other end who had tried to blow his brains out in Vietnam, but it didn't succeed, and he was a vegetable. Unfortunately, it was self-induced, but there's a funny story. My friend, the ranger, he had a nice sense of humor, and we used to laugh a lot, and I would have visitors. My best friend Greg, who was the CEO I spoke about, lived in Northern California, and he would come down with his parents and visit me quite often. I think they were in San Jose at the time. But anyway, so my ranger guy, his brother's there one day, and I had met his brother before. Westmoreland was scheduled to come to that ward to award Purple Hearts. Now, I wasn't getting a Purple Heart. You don't get a Purple Heart from escaping a truck. But most of the people there, except for the suicidal guy, were going to get Purple Hearts. The ranger hated Westmoreland. Sorry if you hear this. Didn't like him at all. A lot of soldiers didn't like Westmoreland. So when he knew that he was coming to visit and actually hand out the Purple Hearts, he didn't want to be there. Now, we were in isolation ward, so you couldn't leave. You could just walk out. You had to get check out. And to come in, you had to put a white sterile robe on. And they were trying to keep it as clean as possible. So we went AWOL. You can't get me now. We went AWOL. His brother made a suggestion that we drive around San Francisco, and the soldiers said, cool with me. He unplugs his lung pump. We put on these bright royal blue robes, full length, and while nobody's looking, we sneak out of the ward. We walk through the hospital like that, nobody suspects anything, get into his car, and we, for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, drove around San Francisco. It was unbelievable. Well, we had to pee at one point. We're like on Market Street, there's a drive-in restaurant that has the big counter and tables. Wasn't a Denny's, but something local. We had to pee so bad, we got out of the car, him and I both, the lung guy and I, and we walked through the entire restaurant to get to the bathroom. These people could not believe it. Look at these, they probably thought we were escaping from a mental ward. But that was kind of a funny story. We get back, anyway, they were furious, absolutely furious. But what are they gonna do to us, right? So that was the story we had in common. So I'm there for 3 months. Towards the end of my 3 months, when I would know that I was gonna be getting better, they sent you down to the basement where there's a guy there who's reassigning people. Key job, he's just reassigning people. And all they had then, they didn't have computers, they had the little index cards, right? So I'm sitting there and he says, well, your new assignment is Fort Gordon, Georgia. Oh, there was Signal Corps there. Now Signal Corps, we were in communications, but Signal Corps is much more sophisticated. You climb 50-foot poles instead of 35-foot poles, and you have to know a lot more about communications, so it's an advanced kind of communications. So I didn't have any problem. My dad was from Atlanta, Georgia. I didn't think much about it. But a couple of days later, I'm there, and there's this male nurse who I'd known for quite a while there, regular guy. He says, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Fort Gordon. He goes, no, man, you don't want to go there. I said, what do you mean? He was a black guy. He said, they're totally racist. I'm Jewish. Not a practicing Jew, but I'm Jewish. He said, they'll eat you for lunch, Leon. So I'm scared to death. Oh my God. I'm just an ex-musician, man. I'm not a fighter guy. So I said, oh God. So about a week later, I'm walking the hallways, because now I'm pretty free to get around. And I see the same guy, like Sargeant, but he's on a regular floor. And I stopped and I said, I can't go to Fort Gordon, Georgia. Is there anything you can do? He says, bring me $50 cash in an envelope, and we'll see what we can do. So I wire my parents or call them, Mom, I need money. She sends me money order, I guess it was in those days. And I go down with my $50 in the envelope, and I sit in his desk and kind of slip it to him. He goes, well, you know where you're going to go now? Fort Ord. So they sent me back to Fort Ord, where I started from in California. And now I'm a sergeant. I'd gotten promoted to sergeant while I was in Vietnam. And now I was some authority. And all those punks that were privates when I was below that, those guys used to be so power hungry. Drop and give me 40. You know, they walk around, you look at a corporal the wrong way, drop and give me 40. Run around they love doing that shit. So now I'm the sergeant, and they're still the private, or even corporal. And I remembered a couple of them who really, really took advantage of it, and I nailed them, man. Oh, they would harass guys, and I'd interrupt them, and have them go down right in front of the kid. So that was fun. One of the other things that was really sad now that I'm back in Fort Ord, I become a teacher for the basic 8-week training in communications. My week was wire splicing and detection of where a break might be. It's a week-long class. And what I noticed, which was so sad, I don't think it's happening now, but there were some very, very, not the brightest guys that were getting drafted, right? Many of them couldn't even read English, the Hispanics especially. But they would insist that we pass them. They could not do something, and they said, well, show him how to do it until he does it. They had to get bodies, you know, they, how many, 52, 53,000 dead kids, and then all the injured, so they were going through bodies like it was disgusting. Now you think about it retrospectively. So we had to pass them, but that's the way it goes. But that was one thing I learned that was kind of unfair. Okay, so I've got my new orders in Fort Ord. I get to Fort Ord, and I'm teaching classes, and every Friday, because I'm a sergeant teacher, I go home. I can ride down to Los Angeles, where I live, and play the weekend. It was cool. It was like I had a job for the last, I guess it was 6 months left. And, but I would play so hard over the weekends, I was exhausted. But I would never sleep, it seemed like. So I would leave at like 11 or 12 at night, Sunday. It was about a 6-hour drive back to Monterey, where Fort Ord was. Barely staying awake. I would take my shower, get dressed for the day. I'd go the whole 8 hours or whatever it was, and it was time for dinner. I would go straight to my cot with my boots on and my fatigues, lay back like this, and sleep until the next morning. That was my routine. Anyway, that was kind of neat. So I did that for 3 months, and then they reassigned me and another guy that I knew to Fort Irwin. So I spent my last 3 months at Fort Irwin, which was an artillery battery, kind of a store ground, really. They had just billions of tanks and all sorts of stuff that they would use for warfare, and we still had plenty left over, I guess. So I was there, and I don't know what we did. We were more like policemen, trying to make sure everybody stayed okay. It was weird. I don't know what we did. I can't even remember. But I do know that there was a story there that Fort Irwin was like 6 or 7 miles from the center of Death Valley. You would drive through the gate, and then it would be 30 miles, though, before you got to the fort. And so if you were going away and you didn't have a car and you wanted to hitchhike, you'd have to get to that 30-mile exit before you get to the road, so you'd have to buy a ride or hitchhike somebody. But what was so funny, somebody said that years before, they still had the gate, but years before, they were paying, during this time, they were paying what they called isolation pay. If you were so far away, like if you were in the Antarctic, but now we were in the middle of the desert. If you were so far away, they'd give you an extra $50 a week or a month or something. Well, some smart little guy in the service had, the help list or something, give us a comment. Some guy put in there, why don't you move the gate? So they moved the gate 30 miles out, and that was the beginning of the fort, even though you had to drive 30 miles to get to it. And that eliminated isolation pay. I thought that was kind of interesting. So anyway, the last 3 months at Fort Irwin was good time. And they had a program then that you could get an early out up to 90 days if you went back to school. I didn't tell you much about my history of college, but I think I told you about the ADD and all the trouble I got in. Well, I continued that. That was my life story. I was in college, but I couldn't focus. I could not focus. I couldn't do the homework. I couldn't stay in class. I'm distracted like crazy. So I got drafted out of college. I think I was the only guy that got drafted out of college. I went back, tried to go to college, but that didn't work. And you come back from a service time, and then especially in some kind of a war-torn area, and I came back and it was like I had AIDS like 10 years. So I'm sitting there with these people gets out of high school, and I'm thinking, I feel like I was in grammar school. I couldn't relate to any of them anymore. And I hadn't played my music for a couple of years. I tried to get into the Army band with my clarinet, and I knocked out a really good audition. I went up 9 times to the, but they get great musicians. I didn't make it, so that's the end of that story. But I loved music, so when I came back, I couldn't handle college again. I saw this guy practicing in the practice room on his guitar, and we kind of introduced each other. And I played sax, clarinet, and flute then. Could also fake on the keyboard, but I was a good singer and performer. So this guy, he could only be 19 himself, Tom, and said, "Hey, you want to join our band? We got to get in the band together. We could use a sax player, singer." So I joined the band. 3 months later, we're on the road, and we spent about 3 months traveling around the country. Our first job was Cheyenne, Wyoming. We got fired on the first day, the third set. In Cheyenne, Wyoming, these little towns, all the owners are big shots, you know. You can be like a King Tut in a small town if you own the restaurant, or if you have the money of the town. So we met him that night as we landed, or we came in. It was late at night by the time we got there. We set up our music and stuff, and he bought us a drink at his bar. It was a steakhouse. It was Spillman was his name, and it was Spillman Steakhouse in Cheyenne, Wyoming. The rumor was if you opened up another steakhouse down the road, it would burn down. Spillman was like the gangster of the town, right? And we were playing the gangster's place, so cool. But he insisted we play low volume. Well, here we are. Some of the kid was 18. We were young kids in our first band experience. All we wanted to do is just rock and roll, right? But we were doing top 40 stuff. But even that included some Stones and stuff. And so we weren't prepared for like 2 hours of dinner sets. But he said, you have to keep the volume down. We serve really good steaks. That's where our money is. After dinner, such and such a time, then you can open it up a bit. All right, so the first night we're on stage, very first night, we start off, it's already too loud. That's usually, most club owners always say you're playing too loud. So we toned it down. But he had to keep warning us because we got carried away. And that was fine, but we were within range. The third set, which we thought was our time to rock, we open up with Honky Tonk Woman. And we were cranking. And apparently, Mr. Spillman, who was out of town, called the bartender at that time, and he heard us, and he was so pissed off, he said, pull the plug. So there were people in the nightclub, and the bartender goes and pulls the plug, and we're dead, no music. We were fired. And that's kind of how it went. Then we went from Cheyenne, our next job was in Florida. So we were kids, and we had this stupid manager getting us jobs, but it was such a blast. Meeting girls in every town, you know, I was making up for a lot of lost ground. I was one of those late bloomers. So every town you go into, you'd find another girl, maybe 2 or 3. We'd stay a week or 2 weeks at a club. It was a blast. We came back, and long story short, I ended up staying in music for 10 years as a professional. A couple of bands. I actually made a couple of records. One of them was called, and it is in the Library of Congress, Happy Birthday USA. It's a 45. And I was going to get rich on that. It was a great song, I thought. It still is. And I thought, okay, every 4th of July, millions of people will listen to the song, right? Well, that didn't happen. And but you can still hear it on the YouTube. At 30 years old, I found a girl. My last gig was in Santa Barbara. So I lived in Santa Barbara for 3 years. And we worked at now it's the Sheraton, but it was a privately owned nice hotel. I met Brian Wilson. The Beach Boys used to rehearse down in the basement, and I'd meet him during the day sometimes. That's when he was a little spaced out. But they were just wonderful experiences. But I got burnt out. Because my records didn't get discovered. I said I gave it a shot. Basically, the job in Santa Barbara came because the producer who spent money to invest in me to make these records down in Muscle Shoals with high-class stuff. She said, okay, Leon, we're going to get you discovered in 6 or 8 weeks. We're going to get those records moving. So you need to just get a job in a band. Don't start your own band, get a job in a band. So I joined this band in Santa Barbara, and I played sax, and we played it for 3 years, we ended up playing, but they were younger kids, and they wanted to make rock stars, and I said, I'm not going down this route again. I met a woman up there, a gorgeous lady, I got married, and within 6 months, we were back in Los Angeles. I told her I quit, so she marries this musician with that life. I quit, go to LA, couldn't get a job, I had no experience, what am I gonna do? So I got a few odds and ends that were really bad. I was a busboy once and something else, and somebody said, you know, you ought to go to insurance, I'll hire just about anybody. Okay, I got a pregnant wife now. So I see this ad in the paper, it's an Equitable Life, a very large insurance company, I don't know who they are. I'm going now more into the personal stuff towards the end of my life, is that okay? All right, so I get this job with Equitable Life, a pregnant wife, never sold anything in my life, and selling life insurance is not easy. It's like you're selling air. You know, it's not like you're selling something you can kick the can. So it was very hard, but they were going to pay me $900 a month and half commissions. Wow, that was more money. The most money I'd ever made as a musician was $14,000 a year, and this was going to equal more than that. So I studied hard, I worked hard, worked 12, 15 hours a day. They wanted me to sell all my friends and relatives. I said, I'm not doing that. I don't even know what this stuff is. So I started cold calling. I would cold call 200 people a day. Businesses, homes, you could call in those days. Sell a homeowner policy or a life insurance. It was hell, but I finally started getting appointments, and after 5 years, I was somewhat established. My baby was born, and everything was good. 3 years later, a divorce, but so I ultimately, there's so much history there, but I don't want to bore everybody with that one. But ultimately, I'll bring it today. I end up opening my own firm of financial planning and wealth management, they call it now. But one backup. During the first year of being in business, my brother suffers an injury which leaves him quadriplegic. He's in Grand Junction, Colorado. So my mom and I go up there hysterical, blah, blah, blah. We spend a few weeks there. We research hospitals. He comes back and he spends 6 months in the hospital. He had great insurance because he worked at an oil field, Tidewater, I think it was, as a welder. And he was getting his life together. And he had a child too at the time. Anyway, he asked me, the second day I was there in Colorado, he wanted me to kill him. He was totally paralyzed. You can imagine what that must be like. So that night I had to think, I mean, what am I going to do? Am I going to somehow give him pills and kill him? What do I do? I was faced with this huge dilemma. And I had not come up with a resolution, but the next day, he had a little 3-year-old boy. He had been thinking about this for so long, and he said, Leon, I can't do it. I have to be there for Matthew. So he lived another 18 years and then eventually died, like most quads do after a while. So anyway, I end up going through this. So I have a wonderful career for 40 years. Great friends, great clients. To today, there's still dozens of clients we talk all the time as friends, not business. But towards the end, as I was trying to sell my business, I fell into this really deep depression. It's terrible. If you don't know about depression, most people don't get it. They just don't understand it. But it's dark, very, very dark. But I came out of it. I won't go into those details. They're not important. I came out of it, and here I am. My business was sold 2 years ago. I sold half of my business, which was health insurance, because I ended up selling a lot of health insurance after my brother's accident and became very good at it. In the first 6 years, I started building some business. But the Equitables decided to get out of that business. They were losing money. So now I had to start. I was selling life insurance here and there, but that business continued to grow. So I was and then I got my CFP, my Certified Financial Planner designation, and the proper registrations with the SEC, and I started doing financial planning for a fee, started to manage money, and the health insurance didn't seem as important to me. But fortunately, around that about mid-1990s, I decided to get out of the corporate environment and open up my own shop. So I moved to Ventura because I also wanted to set up for retirement. But I moved, so I made a commitment to myself that I would go visit the clients. I wouldn't have them come up to Ventura. Most of these clients were in the San Fernando Valley, Orange County, Los Angeles. I had a lot of business clients, corporate clients. You can't ask them to drive, to forget about it. So that's when I started riding Harleys, and I started riding Harleys for the next 25 years. I still have a motorcycle today. And I would park my car and never drive it. I would ride my Harley everywhere. 2-3 times a week, downtown, Orange County, you name it. I would put thousands of miles, maybe 15 to 20,000 miles on a motorcycle. And people don't do that. They usually let them sit in their garage and they get 2,000 miles on them.
So when did you start riding a motorcycle?
Oh, in 1950. I'm sorry, I'm at the age 50.
Oh, age 50.
Okay, so I started riding motorcycles and prior to moving to Ventura, but all I did was ride my motorcycle. And I convinced my wife, I'm so silly, I was the one making the money, my wife never worked. She worked for me for a few years, that didn't work, I don't encourage that. So she retired quickly and lived happily ever after, 33 years. God bless her, if you're seeing this. So I go through Harleys every 2 or 3 years. I was making money. I told myself, and my wife, I started smoking cigars after I got out of the service. And I found out that they weren't cancerous if you don't inhale, so that gave me green lights. But it's an expensive habit. It's like burning a $10 bill. Roll up a $10 bill, burn it. Now it's more like rolling up a $12 bill. But I would go through 2 or 3 cigars a day when I was driving sometimes, and it didn't matter. I would smoke in my car. It was something to do, right? And I needed more distractions from my ADHD. Anyway, I said, honey, if I'm on my motorcycle, I can't smoke cigars. So that saves me probably $20 a ride. You multiply that to 30 days or 20 days, and you end up with a $300, $400, $500 savings. So I could buy a Harley every couple of years. But I had a good time. Went to Sturgis. With 14 guys, we went to Sturgis. Anyway, so I sold half of my business to this young girl who I had hired. When I moved to Ventura, I needed to hire somebody. I didn't have anybody. My wife was helping, but that wasn't going to last. I needed somebody to answer the phones. I had a very active business at that point. So we go to the high school. We get this little girl. She's 17 years old. She's in high school, serving scoops of ice cream at 31 flavors. But we hire her to answer the phone. She's so scared she doesn't even know how to answer the phone. I put her in a closet to show her how to answer the phone. And she was very attractive, really a bright young girl. And I didn't think she'd last much out of high school, let alone, college. But she liked the business. And as she got more and more likable, after 5 years, I knew I had to keep her here. And she was working all the health insurance now. So I gave her 5% of my business. And I said, listen, we're going to execute a plan 20 years from now. I want you to be part of it. And sure as shit, 20 years later, we made all the agreements, did it all right. She's now paying me $600,000 for that business. She's now paying me every quarter. The checks arrive every quarter, and she's thriving. She just bought a brand new Tesla, one of these super sport Teslas. I know I undersold it. So she got a good deal. The investment component was a little harder because all those clients that I had, about 150, which we had really deep personal relationships with, my average client was 25, 30 years. Really close relationships. Managing their money and helping them with their insurance or whatever they needed. I needed somebody good, and I interviewed a couple of firms. Disgusting what's out there. There's some firms that call themselves financial planners, and all they want to do is sell you annuities. There's other guys, financial planners, all they want to do is sell you real estate, REITs, and trusts. They're only looking for their commission. Anyway, I won't go through all the reasons why that's not a good idea, but I couldn't find anybody that I could feel comfortable with transferring 150 people over to. some millions of dollars, some a few $100,000, but it was all very important money. But finally, I found this guy at Raymond James, who was a class act, young fellow, but doing really well, very aggressive in marketing and sharp, MBA, and we hit it off. For the next 3 months, after we did our agreement and stuff, I had to meet with every client to introduce them to this guy. I was in the middle of the throes of my depression. I could barely say this is, ugh. Anyway, he'd go through his pitch. 99% of the people transferred over, which is unheard of. They just trusted me that I had the right guy. And I would say 95% of them are still with him. So the last 2 years I've been retired, getting my money in the bank. I'd saved up some money along the way too. But selling the business right really made the difference in my future. So now I'm over my depression. I'm loving life. I meet fellows like this guy behind the camera. I have my motorcycle outside his garage where we're filming this. I wake up every morning grateful for being alive. My wife and I are in the best place we've ever been. I have my garden I work on a couple hours a day. I have my breakfast routines. I do this. Yesterday I had another interview somewhere. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm taking my wife, my daughter, my stepdaughter, and her husband, all 4 of us, first class, because I will only go first class now, so I can't let them sit and coach. So I had to commit to that. We're going to see my son, who's a neuroscientist in outside of Boston. Works for an incredible company. I won't go into that, but amazing stuff. His company did the first gene therapy ever in America. And anyway, so that's what he's doing now, and doing well financially. So he just had a baby boy, 2.5, so I can't wait to see him again. I go there twice a year now, 3 or 4 weeks at a time, to expose myself to him and start to do the grandparenting thing. Because I did have the experience prior, and being with children, it's just a beautiful thing, and so I don't get to see him enough. But here I am. I joined this wonderful group of men who I met through a guy, and now I spend every couple of weeks, I sit with the 20 guys, probably average age 84, 85, and we talk life, and it's wonderful. It's just a great experience. I enjoy a few glasses of wine periodically, which is probably why I have this. Hopefully he's only doing a headshot though. I'm really very thin. And that's it.
Cool.
That's
yeah.
it.
Tell us a little bit about how you think the military service changed you as a person.
Oh, that's a good question. It changed me as a person. It took me from being a boy to a man. It showed me, you know, we lived in a San Fernando Valley, Panorama City was all growing. That's all you know, right? You know that's your demographics. They can afford a small house, and you go in the Army, and all of a sudden now you meet everybody. You meet the racists, you meet the wonderful guys, you meet the chaplains, you meet the guy that's a motor car mechanic, he's a guy that's in Omaha, and another guy's a farmer, and you meet the entire country. And you realize there's a whole nother world out there. So you start getting more confident. I think that the 2 years that I was in the service, I grew tremendously. And I learned so much about life and people, which of course helped me forward in life, you know. I'm very socially oriented, I love people to death, but that's how it changed me. It changed me for the better. I was lucky. It doesn't always work that way. But I've led a pretty charmed life. I thank God, and I'm grateful for it every day. I've been very fortunate. But that's how it changed me pretty much. It turned me from a boy to a man.
Yeah. Well, you made a telling statement where you said after you got out, the people that you were meeting in college, you weren't able to relate to.
I could not relate to most of my friends either. They were going through their natural evolutionary process, but somehow I advanced that a little quicker.
Yeah.
And because at those ages, most people didn't see any poverty.
Mm.
They didn't see people starving in the streets. I mean, that's all Vietnam was. It's great now, but they were starving to death. They'd walk around in their slippers, and pretty sad. And then we're there trying to defend against a communist invasion. I never realized it at the time, because most of my friends avoided the draft, or actually evaded the draft. I got a couple of friends still in Canada. I was not that politically oriented. I figured if I got drafted, I should do what I'm supposed to do. It's very patriotic, right? So all that experience changed me a lot. Yeah, coming back and experiencing the difference from just 2 years earlier, the kids that I would have been in college with, I come back and they're like, oh, it seems like they went back 10 years, or they went back 10 years. They were like children. So that was a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. No, it changes it, no question
Yeah.
about it. Yeah, whatever your experience,
Yeah.
yeah, you're not gonna be the same after that.
No, no.